Speaking about the case, a detective from Greater Manchester Police's Child Protection Investigation Unit said Joynes abused her position of trust as a teacher and used it to manipulate and abuse two boys. She continued, "It's clear from some of the public commentary on social media that there's still a lack of understanding when it comes to men and boys being the victims of sexual offences. Women can still be paedophiles. This term is not reserved only for men. I hope this investigation gives men and boys who may be sexually exploited the confidence to come forward." In a victim impact statement, boy B said, "I was coerced, controlled, manipulated, sexually abused and mentally abused." Joynes was jailed for a total of 6.5 years for the offences against both boys, and a sexual harm prevention order has been put in place for 10 years. The baby is being brought up by boy B and his parents.
So when we're thinking about the behaviour of staff and whether there could be a potential for grooming and abusing children in the school, some of the things that we need to think about would be when the adult is starting to give special attention, particularly to individual students, and they become what you might call a confidant. In other words, the young person becomes someone that only they can help or only they can talk to, and you sort of hear them talking about this in the staff room. Oh, don't worry about him, don't worry about her. I'll have a word with them. I'm the only person who can help. That sort of person. Social media is a challenge. So this person might be using social media in a way to contact children. We quite often see that behaviour nowadays. If you read the reports from the Teacher Regulation Authority about people who've been banned from teaching, these are some of the behaviours that you often see. They might start in an open social media platform like TikTok, for example, or Instagram, and then they persuade them to go on to a more secure product like WhatsApp, perhaps. They're often wanting to find themselves alone or in private with the young person, which is beyond what you would expect, or it's done in a more surreptitious way. So we should always make sure that if we are doing one-to-one work, one-to-one tuition, anything like that, that we're open and transparent, not only in the space in which we're having those conversations, but also by other colleagues knowing that that's happening. There might be small gifts that are being given to young people because they need it, or because they said they didn't have the bus fare or something like that. Could be small gifts. It might also turn into much larger gifts. One of the other things that the offenders will often try to do is to befriend the child's parents, and so in doing that become a much more trusted person who could spend time with their child. So the children that are potentially most at risk, as we've heard, are vulnerable children, but perhaps those children who have additional needs, perhaps particularly those children who need any kind of personal or intimate care. Children who've been abused before are often re-victimised by other people. Children who are particularly stressed and need the support and help of an adult. Children in poverty. Obviously, if you can provide financial things or you can buy things that they wouldn't be able to get, then that's perhaps one way to groom a young person. And young people who are isolated. Although, having said that, offenders will often try to isolate the young person from their friends or their family or from others so that they can become much more isolated. So some of these are some of the things that we need to be aware of. So as an organisation, what we're trying to put in place is our safer recruitment processes. so that we don't attract the wrong people, so that our recruitment processes can not only detect, but we can also deter people that wouldn't be suitable. We can, of course, raise awareness of these issues, and when you've raised awareness within your school, it becomes much more difficult for an offender to behave in some of the ways that we've already seen. You need to develop a sort of self-referral, transparent process. So, for example, if you were to find yourself in an unexpected one-to-one situation, then you need to talk to your line manager or perhaps to the head teacher or the DSL about being found in that particular situation. So, for example, if you were in your classroom at lunchtime in a primary school and a child comes into your classroom crying, very, very upset, then you want to help the child, but you also don't want to be, found on your own in a classroom with a crying child. So you'd sort of, say to the child, let's go and find some help. Goodness me, whatever's happened. You can take them, from that situation on your own in the classroom, down the corridor, perhaps where there are some other people. But having ended up in that situation, then talking about it with the head teacher, with the DSL, with some line manager, then you can say, this is the situation that I found myself in today, so people can't misconstrue what may or may not have happened in that circumstance. And then we talk about this central recording, which is obviously confidential and is managed usually by the head teacher. Now, as we've seen today, we've got concerns about female staff as well as about male staff, but often this isn't seen in the same way. If you need to be aware of stereotypes about who the victim and who the perpetrator might be. And one of the reasons for that is that according to those stereotypes, contact with adolescent boys in the cases that the researchers looked at was often arising from the behaviour of the victim rather than the behaviour of the adult, the professional. So it's important, even with female offenders, that you also consider the possibility of a sexual motivation. In terms of low-level concerns, this is why all of this was brought into keeping children safe over the last few years. And one of the most useful documents for this is the Guidance for Safer Working Practices for those working with children and young people. And I really like this document for two reasons. One is it's very clear and it helps us understand what behaviours are acceptable and what are not. So it tells you, the concerns, what you should think about, but then it says that means in day-to-day life, that's what it looks like. Okay, so it's a very useful document, and if you haven't already seen it, then it's quite useful to get hold of a copy of that. Many schools have used it to build their own behaviour policy for staff or code of conduct, whatever it's called.